My parents called me, ungrateful for refusing to trade my big apartment for my sister's small house, just because she's pregnant. Before we start, let's hype this video up. Comment below where you're watching from, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. That way you won't miss any of our next jaw-dropping stories. My name is Cassandra, and I need to tell you about the day my family tried to steal my apartment. I know how that sounds. Dramatic, right? But I promise you, by the end of this, you'll understand why I use that exact word. Steal. 3 months before the incident, my sister called at 2 in the morning. Her car had broken down. Again. Can you just wire me $1,500? I'll pay you back when I get my tax refund. I sent the money from my bed, half asleep. The tax refund never materialized. It never did. It was a Saturday in late September when she sent a text asking me to come to her gender reveal party. The message was sweet, excited, full of emojis. She insisted I arrive early, before the other guests. I should have recognized the setup. It's the same way she'd cornered me about co-signing her lease 2 years ago. But I'm an idiot sometimes, especially when it comes to family. The venue was this ridiculously expensive event space in the nice part of town. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the works. I remember thinking my sister and her husband must have blown their entire savings on this party. She was wearing a flowing white dress, her pregnancy barely showing at 4 months. Her husband stood next to her with this weird smirk I couldn't quite read. My parents were already there, dressed like they were attending a wedding. "You made it!" my sister squealed, hugging me tight. Too tight. I hugged her back, genuinely happy for her. Despite everything, she was my baby sister, and she was having a baby. That meant something to me. We sat down at this elaborately decorated table, roses everywhere, pink and blue ribbons, tiny baby shoes as centerpieces. My mother poured champagne for everyone except my sister, who got sparkling cider. That's when my father cleared his throat, and I noticed they were all looking at me with these strange expressions. Expectant. Hungry almost. "We need to talk about something important," my father said. As a family. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Nothing good ever came from that phrase in my family. But I smiled and nodded, trying to be supportive. After all, maybe they needed help with baby expenses. I could do that. I'd done it before. Paid for my sister's college textbooks, helped with my parents' property taxes twice, covered my brother-in-law's car repairs last year. "Your sister and her husband need to move," my mother began, folding her hands on the table. "Their neighborhood isn't safe for raising a child." I knew the area where they lived. It wasn't great. High crime rates, underfunded schools, regular police sirens at night. I'd actually grown up in that same neighborhood before I clawed my way out through law school and 80-hour work weeks. "Okay," I said carefully. "Do you need help with a down payment somewhere safer?" My sister and her husband exchanged a look. My father leaned forward. "We have a better solution. A fair solution that helps everyone." That's when my brother-in-law dropped the bomb. "We think you should trade apartments with us." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, but nobody else was laughing. They were all staring at me with dead serious expressions, and that's when the cold dread started spreading through my chest. "You're not serious," I said. "Completely serious," my sister said, her voice taking on this edge I recognized from childhood. The edge that meant she was about to throw a tantrum until she got what she wanted. "You have a 3-bedroom in Riverside Heights. We have a 1-bedroom in Oakmont. You're single. We're starting a family." I sat there, stunned. Riverside Heights was one of the best neighborhoods in the city. Safe streets, amazing schools, low crime, everything. I'd worked my entire adult life to afford that apartment. 12 years of brutal hours at the firm, passing up vacations and relationships and sleep. That apartment was mine. I'd earned every single square foot of it. And they wanted me to just give it to them? Move into their cramped apartment in the neighborhood I'd spent years escaping? "This is insane," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't be serious right now." My mother's face hardened. "Don't be selfish, Cassandra. Think about your niece or nephew. Think about the kind of life they deserve." And that's when I realized this wasn't a request. This was an ambush. "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. I'm not trading my apartment." The temperature in that beautiful room dropped about 30 degrees. My sister's face went red, and I watched her transform from glowing mother-to-be into something I barely recognized. "Of course you won't," she spat. "You've always been selfish. Always thought you were better than us." "That's not fair," I protested, but my father cut me off. "You live alone in a 3-bedroom apartment in the safest neighborhood in the city. Your sister is starting a family in a place where there was a shooting just last month. Last month, Cassandra. And you're telling me you can't make this one sacrifice? I felt like I was being cornered by wolves. Sacrifice? You're asking me to give up everything I worked for. That apartment is mine. I bought it. I've been paying the mortgage for 8 years. And we'll take over your mortgage, my brother-in-law said, like he was doing me some kind of favor. We'll handle all the payments. You'd just move into our place. It's paid off, no mortgage at all. Think of all the money you'd save. I wanted to scream. Their apartment was paid off because it was barely worth anything. The neighborhood alone made it undesirable, not to mention it was one bedroom with paper-thin walls and roaches. I'd visited once and spent the entire time hearing the couple upstairs screaming at each other. This is not happening, I said, standing up. I'm sorry about your situation, but my apartment is not the solution. That's when my sister really showed her true colors. You know what your problem is? She hissed, standing up too. Her husband tried to put a calming hand on her arm, but she shook it off. You're alone. You're going to die alone. You have no husband, no kids, nobody who actually needs you. But I have a baby coming, a baby who deserves better than what you had growing up, better than what I'm stuck in now. The words hit like physical blows. So because I'm single, I don't deserve safety? I don't deserve the life I built? You don't need all that space, my mother said, her voice cold. A single woman doesn't need 3 bedrooms in the nicest part of town. It's wasteful, selfish. I grew up in that neighborhood you're living in now, I told my sister, fighting to keep my voice level. I remember the sirens, the fear, the violence. I got out because I worked myself half to death to escape it. And now you want me to go back? To give up everything so you can have what I earned? Your sister needs you, my father said. And there was an edge of threat in his voice I'd never heard directed at me before. Family helps family. Or have you forgotten that after all your success? I looked around at all of them. My parents, my sister, my brother-in-law. They were looking at me like I was the villain in this story. Like I was the monster for not wanting to surrender my home, my safety, my peace of mind. Other guests were starting to arrive, filtering into the room, and I could see my family's expressions shift, putting on masks of warmth and celebration. My sister leaned in close, her voice a harsh whisper. I've always deserved the life you have. Always. And now I'm going to get it. With or without your cooperation. Then she straightened up, pasted on a bright smile, and turned to greet her friends. I stood there shaking, realizing I'd just been threatened. By my own sister. At her gender reveal party. I grabbed my purse, and my mother caught my arm. Don't you dare leave, she hissed. Don't you dare embarrass this family. But I'd already been humiliated enough for one day. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind me, I heard my sister's voice, loud enough for the arriving guests to hear. Some people are just too selfish to be happy for others. I kept walking. I didn't look back. I made it maybe 10 steps before I heard my sister's heels clacking rapidly behind me. Don't you walk away from me, she shouted. And I turned around just in time to see her with a champagne flute raised. Before I could react, she threw the entire contents in my face. Pink champagne. Rose-flavored, I found out later. It soaked my hair, ran down my face, drenched the front of my cream-colored blouse. The room went completely silent. Every single person who'd arrived for the party stopped and stared. I just stood there, frozen, champagne dripping off my chin onto the marble floor. My sister was breathing hard, her face twisted with rage. That's what you deserve, she said. Ungrateful bitch. I heard gasps, whispers. Someone's phone camera clicked. But I didn't move. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't cry. I just looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Or maybe someone I'd never actually known. Then I looked at my parents, who were standing there with their mouths open but making no move to defend me or apologize. They were embarrassed. But not for me. For themselves. For the scene. My brother-in-law was pulling my sister back, muttering something about hormones and stress. Some of the guests were laughing nervously. A few looked horrified. One woman I didn't recognize stepped forward with a napkin, but I waved her off. Thank you for showing everyone who you really are, I said quietly to my sister. Then I turned and walked out, champagne still dripping from my hair. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking. Not from anger. Well, not just anger. From something deeper. A kind of clarity I'd been avoiding for years. This wasn't new behavior from my family. This was just the first time it had been this obvious, this violent, this public. How many times had they asked me for money, for help, for sacrifices? And every single time when I'd given them what they wanted, it had never been enough. There was always something more they needed. Something more I owed them, apparently, just for being related. I was still sitting there when someone knocked on my car window. I looked up to see the woman who'd offered me the napkin. She was older, maybe in her 50s, dressed impeccably. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said when I rolled down the window, "but I'm a prosecutor, and what I just witnessed was assault. Battery, technically. And I think you should know that." I stared at her. "You're serious?" "Completely. That was assault, in front of dozens of witnesses. And from what I overheard before the incident, there's a pattern of financial abuse and coercion." She handed me her card. "I'm not suggesting you press charges, that's your decision, but I want you to know that what happened in there isn't normal family conflict. It's abuse, and it's criminal." I took her card with shaking hands. Her name was printed in simple black letters. "Why are you telling me this?" She leaned against my car, her expression hard. "Because 30 years ago, my family tried to convince me to give my sister my house. They said I didn't need it because I didn't have kids. They said I was selfish for not helping family." She smiled sadly. "I gave in, and it destroyed my life for 10 years. So let me tell you something I wish someone had told me back then. Family that asks you for sacrifice and calls it love? That's not love. That's control." The words hit me like a physical blow. Control. Not love. Control. After she left, I sat there staring at her card. Assault. The word kept echoing in my head. My sister had assaulted me. In public. On camera. Probably, given all those phones. And my parents had just stood there. Had essentially endorsed it through their silence. I started my car and drove home to my beautiful, safe, 3-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. I took a long shower, washing the champagne out of my hair, and then I made a decision that would change everything. I called the prosecutor and told her I wanted to know my options. All of them. By the time I went to bed that night, I'd already started documenting everything. Every text message from my family, every guilt trip, every request for money I'd fulfilled over the years. Every time they'd made me feel small or selfish or inadequate. I was building a case, though I didn't fully understand what kind yet. What I did understand was this. I was done being their bank, their safety net, their punching bag. My sister had thrown champagne in my face and called me a bitch in front of dozens of people, and my parents had sided with her. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family. Spoiler alert, I stood alone, and for the first time in my life, that felt like exactly where I needed to be. I met with the prosecutor. I'll call her the prosecutor because that's what matters here. On Tuesday morning at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She brought a legal pad and listened while I explained everything. Not just the party, but years of patterns I was finally seeing clearly. "They've been doing this your whole life," she said after I finished. It wasn't a question. The requests for money, the guilt trips, the implication that your success somehow belongs to them too. "I thought I was helping family," I said, stirring my coffee for something to do with my hands. "Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Helping is voluntary. What they're doing is coercion. Financial abuse disguised as family obligation." She flipped through her notes. "The apartment demand is just the biggest ask in a long pattern. They've been testing your boundaries for years, and you've been saying yes because they trained you to believe saying no makes you selfish." That hit hard because it was true. Growing up, I'd been the responsible one. The one who got good grades, worked part-time jobs, sent money home during college even when I could barely afford ramen. My sister had been the baby, the one who got away with everything. My parents made it clear my job was to be successful enough to lift everyone else up. Not for myself. For them. "What are my options?" I asked. She laid them out clinically. I could press charges for assault. I could pursue a restraining order if they continued harassing me. I could document everything and prepare for the likelihood they'd escalate. "People who feel entitled to your resources don't stop when you say no," she warned. "They get angry. They retaliate." I went home and spent the next week doing exactly what she suggested, documenting everything. I made spreadsheets of every dollar I'd given them over the years. It was staggering. Almost $60,000 in loans that were never repaid. Emergencies that always seemed to happen right after I got a bonus or a raise. I screenshotted every text message, every email, every voicemail. I created a timeline. Meanwhile, the messages from my family started rolling in. My mother first. "You embarrassed us at your sister's party. You need to apologize." Not an apology for the champagne or the ambush. A demand that I apologize for leaving. Then my father. "Family takes care of family. Your sister needs help and you're being stubborn." This isn't like you. As if the real me was someone who just handed over everything I'd earned without question. My sister sent a voice message I'll never forget. She was crying, saying the stress I was causing wasn't good for the baby, that I was putting her pregnancy at risk by being selfish, that God would judge me for choosing an apartment over my own flesh and blood. She didn't mention throwing champagne in my face. That apparently wasn't worth discussing. My brother-in-law tried a different approach. Look, I get it. You worked hard for what you have, but we need help here. The shooting last week was 2 blocks from our apartment. 2 blocks. Do you want that on your conscience if something happens to your sister or the baby? I didn't respond to any of them. The prosecutor had advised me to stop engaging, to let them show their true colors without my interference. They'll escalate, she'd said. And when they do, you'll have everything you need. She was right. When I didn't respond, they got nastier. My mother called me a disgrace to the family. My father said I'd always been cold and unfeeling, that my success had turned me into someone they didn't recognize. My sister sent a string of messages alternating between begging and threatening. You owe me this. I've always lived in your shadow. Everyone sees how selfish you are now. I saved everything, every single word. And I contacted a lawyer, my own lawyer, someone who specialized in family law and harassment cases. She looked at everything I'd compiled and just nodded slowly. You're building a solid case, she said. For the assault, definitely. Possibly for a restraining order if they continue. And we can make it very clear that any further contact regarding your property will be considered harassment. 3 weeks after the party, I filed an official police report about the assault. I had witness statements from 3 people who'd been there, including the prosecutor. I had photos of my champagne-stained clothes. I had medical documentation of the anxiety attacks I'd started having. At the office the next day, my colleague stopped by my desk. We'd worked together for 6 years, grabbed lunch maybe once a month. Can we talk? She asked, closing my office door behind her. Sure. What's up? She sat down, uncomfortable. Look, I saw the video. Everyone has. And I just want to say, as a friend, be careful how you handle this. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The assault charge, the lawsuit. People are starting to talk, and not everyone sees you as the victim. She leaned forward. Some people think you're being vindictive, that you're going too far. Family drama should stay private, you know. I felt my face get hot. She threw champagne in my face. In public. There's a video. I know, I'm not saying she was right. I'm just saying optics matter, especially for women in our field. You don't want to look like someone who can't handle conflict maturely, who uses the legal system to settle personal scores. After she left, I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at my computer screen. Was I being vindictive? Was I taking it too far? Then I remembered my sister's face twisted with rage, the cold champagne dripping down my neck, my parents standing there, silent. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Keep going, I said, with everything. The video dropped 3 weeks after the party, and I had nothing to do with it. That's important to note. I wasn't the one who leaked it, though my family absolutely blamed me. Apparently, someone at the party had recorded the whole thing, not just the champagne throw, but the argument before it. The audio was crystal clear. You could hear my sister telling me I was going to die alone. You could hear my mother calling me wasteful and selfish. You could hear my brother-in-law explaining their plan to take over my apartment like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. And then, of course, you could see my sister throw champagne in my face and call me a bitch while I just stood there, soaking wet and silent. The video showed up in a local community group first. Someone had posted it with the caption, "This is what family abuse looks like. Woman pressured to give up her home, then assaulted when she refuses." Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Local news picked it up. Parenting blogs, women's advocacy pages. It went viral in that specific way that makes people incredibly angry and incredibly invested. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories about family members who demanded money, property, sacrifices, about being called selfish for having boundaries, about being punished for success. The phrase financial abuse disguised as family values kept appearing over and over. People got it. They understood exactly what had happened in that room. A local columnist wrote an entire piece about it. The myth of family obligation, when love becomes extortion. She interviewed family therapists and lawyers. She talked about the pattern of successful family members being treated as ATMs rather than individuals. She mentioned me by name, well, my first name, and suddenly I was the face of a conversation about boundaries and toxic families. My phone exploded. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out to ask if I was okay. Colleagues from my law firm sent supportive messages. My boss called me personally to tell me the firm had my back if I needed anything. But mixed in with the support were messages from my family's friends, people from their church, distant relatives I barely knew, all telling me I was destroying my family over pride, that I should forgive and forget, that this was all being blown out of proportion. My mother called from an unknown number, crying, not apologizing, crying about how humiliated she was, how everyone at church was talking about them, how my father's business partners were asking questions, how my sister couldn't leave the house without people recognizing her as that woman from the video. She begged me to make a public statement saying it was all a misunderstanding, that we'd worked things out. I didn't. I released one statement through my lawyer. The video speaks for itself. I'm pursuing appropriate legal channels, and I won't be commenting further. That was it. No defending myself, no attacking them, just facts. The thing about the truth going viral is that you can't control the narrative anymore. My family had spent years painting me as the selfish, cold career woman who didn't care about family. They'd told that story so many times they believed it themselves. But now the world could see what actually happened when I said no to an unreasonable demand. They could see the entitlement, the manipulation, the violence. And they could judge for themselves who was really in the wrong. Someone found my sister's social media. She had a small following as a mommy-to-be influencer, maybe 3,000 followers. She posted cutesy pregnancy updates and home decorating tips. After the video went viral, her comment sections became war zones. People calling her out, calling her entitled, calling her abusive. She tried defending herself, posting long explanations about how the video didn't show the full context, how I'd been cruel to her for years, how she was just a pregnant woman trying to provide for her baby. It backfired spectacularly. Every defense made her look worse. People started digging into her old posts, finding ones where she'd complained about living in a terrible neighborhood and how she deserved better. Posts where she'd hinted that her older sister had money but wouldn't help her. Posts that, in hindsight, showed exactly the entitlement everyone was accusing her of. I watched it all unfold from my safe, quiet, 3-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I didn't add fuel to the fire. I just let the truth do what truth does when it's finally exposed to light. It burned away all the pretty lies my family had wrapped themselves in, and what was left wasn't attractive at all. The consequences hit my family like a tsunami, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't watch with a sense of grim satisfaction. Not because I wanted them to suffer. Okay, maybe a little. But because for once in my life, there were actual consequences for treating me like garbage. My brother-in-law lost his biggest client first. He worked as an independent consultant for small businesses, and his main client, a guy who accounted for about 40% of his income, sent a terse email terminating their contract. Word got around that the client had seen the video, recognized him, and decided he didn't want to be associated with someone who'd participate in that kind of family ambush. Other clients followed. Turns out people don't love hiring consultants who are publicly known for trying to manipulate family members out of their property. My sister's influencer career imploded even faster. Every single one of her sponsors dropped her within a week. Baby product companies, maternity wear brands, home decor partnerships, all gone. Her follower count tanked from 3,000 to about 400, and most of those were probably hate watchers. She tried rebranding, making her account private, even starting over with a new handle. Nothing worked. The internet has a long memory, and Champagne Assault Sister wasn't exactly marketable. But the thing that really hurt them was what happened to my parents. They'd been active in their homeowners association for years. My father was treasurer. My mother ran the social committee. They loved the status, the respect, the sense of importance. After the video went viral, a petition started circulating to remove them from their positions. The reasoning was simple. People who would condone assault and financial manipulation couldn't be trusted with community funds or representing homeowners' interests. They tried to fight it, obviously. Showed up at the next association meeting ready to defend themselves. But person after person stood up and talked about how uncomfortable they now felt having them in leadership. Someone pointed out that if they'd pressure their own daughter like that, what would they do to neighbors in disputes? The vote wasn't even close. They were removed from both positions, and I heard through the grapevine that people were actively avoiding them in the neighborhood now. The financial impact on my sister and her husband was devastating. They'd been barely making ends meet before, and now with his client list decimated and her sponsor money gone, they were drowning. They'd planned this elaborate baby moon vacation to some beach resort. Had been posting about it for months, building hype with her followers. They had to cancel it, couldn't afford it. And of course, because my sister couldn't help herself, she posted about that too. A long, self-pitying story about how false narratives and edited videos had destroyed their ability to give their baby a proper welcome. People tore her apart in the comments. Again, she really never learned. My father's business took a hit too. He owned a small contracting company, and several of his regular clients quietly stopped calling. In a business built on trust and reputation, being known as the guy who tried to bully his daughter into giving up her apartment wasn't great for the brand. He tried explaining to people that they didn't understand the full situation, that I'd been difficult, that they were just trying to help their pregnant daughter. Nobody cared. The video showed what it showed. I got updates about all of this through various channels. A former colleague who knew my sister socially, my cousin who still talked to my parents, my own lawyer who kept tabs on their social media presence for documentation purposes. I didn't seek the information out, but I didn't avoid it either. I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to understand the full scope of what they were experiencing. Was I supposed to feel guilty? Maybe. That's what they certainly thought. My mother left me a voicemail saying I'd destroyed their lives, that I'd made them social pariahs, that my father was losing business because of my vindictiveness. My sister sent emails blaming me for her financial situation, claiming I could fix everything with one public statement taking responsibility. But here's the thing they still didn't understand. I didn't destroy anything. They did that themselves. I didn't make the video. I didn't share it. I didn't encourage the backlash. I just refused to be their victim anymore, and the world watched them respond to that refusal with more abuse and manipulation. Every consequence they faced was the direct result of their own actions, captured on camera and shared by strangers who saw through their manipulation. I slept just fine at night in my 3-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. Better than I had in years, actually. The calls started coming 6 weeks after everything went public. Different numbers, different times, different family members as intermediaries. I blocked every single one and saved the evidence. My lawyer wanted records of all contact attempts as we moved forward with the assault case. My sister's messages became desperate. Voice notes at 2 a.m. about pregnancy hormones making her act crazy, how I was killing her with silence, how the stress was affecting the baby. She was weaponizing her pregnancy, trying to make me responsible for her health. The manipulation was shameless. My parents recruited extended family. My aunt called me cruel. My uncle sent emails about forgiveness. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years wanted coffee to talk about what happened. I declined everything, keeping responses brief when I responded at all. The prosecutor checked in regularly, warning me that families who can't accept consequences often escalate. She told me to be careful, vary my routine, keep my doors locked. It seemed paranoid until my sister showed up at my building. My doorman called. She'd been in the lobby crying, claiming an emergency. He'd followed protocol and she'd refused to leave, sobbing for over an hour before security escorted her out. The building manager sent me footage. Watching my sister, 6 months pregnant and distraught, did make me feel something. Not guilt. Sadness for what could have been if she'd ever treated me with respect. If she'd valued me as a person instead of a resource. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter. Beautiful in its cold precision. It outlined every contact attempt, every manipulation tactic, every boundary violation. It made clear that further attempts would be considered harassment and strengthen our case. The letter went out via certified mail to my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law. Copies went to family members acting as intermediaries, warning them they could be accessories to harassment. For about a week, things went quiet. I hoped they'd finally understood. I should have known better. My father tried the nuclear option. He wrote me a letter, actual pen and paper, mailed to my office, saying I was no longer part of the family, that they were cutting me off completely, that I was dead to them, that when the baby was born, they'd tell the child I didn't exist. The letter was full of pain and anger, painting me as the destroyer of family harmony, the selfish daughter who'd abandoned them in their time of need. I read it twice, then filed it with everything else. The irony was beautiful. They were threatening to cut me off as if I hadn't already done exactly that. They were treating exile as punishment when it was what I wanted. They still thought they held power over me, that their approval mattered enough to manipulate me. They were wrong. I sent the letter to my lawyer with a note. Add to evidence file. Then I went back to work. I had a closing argument to prepare. My family's drama, filed away, documented, dismissed. I'd learned something important. You can't reason with people who see you as an extension of themselves. You can't negotiate with people who believe your boundaries are attacks. All you can do is protect yourself and let them face the consequences of their own choices. They were wrong. I sent the letter to my lawyer. Add to evidence file. Then I went back to work. I had a closing argument to prepare. My family's drama. Filed away, documented, dismissed. I'd learned something important. You can't reason with people who see you as an extension of themselves. You can't negotiate with people who believe your boundaries are attacks. All you can do is protect yourself and let them face the consequences of their own choices. The assault case moved forward faster than expected. With video evidence, multiple witnesses, and my sister's social media posts, things progressed quickly. My sister tried claiming it was just family drama blown out of proportion. Her lawyer seemed unenthusiastic about that defense. The civil suit hit harder. My lawyer filed for damages, emotional distress, reputational harm, therapy expenses. The amount was substantial. Because my sister and her husband had virtually no assets beyond their apartment and car, the court placed liens on what they had. Their precarious financial situation became impossible. They couldn't move. That hit my sister hardest. The whole point had been escaping their neighborhood, and now they were trapped. The lien meant they couldn't sell without settling the judgment first. They were stuck in the exact situation they desperately wanted to escape, except worse because everyone knew about the video. The stress destroyed their marriage. My brother-in-law blamed my sister. If she'd been more subtle, if she hadn't thrown the champagne, if she hadn't posted so much online, she blamed him for pushing the scheme, for losing clients, for not fixing things. They separated 3 weeks before the baby was due. My sister, 8 months pregnant, moved back with our parents, the same neighborhood she'd complained about for years. It must have felt like returning to prison. My father's business was genuinely struggling. In contracting, reputation is everything, and his was shredded. He'd lost major contracts and couldn't bid on new ones. He'd laid off employees. My mother took a retail job, something she'd considered beneath her before. Now they had my pregnant sister living with them again, with no income, no husband, and a baby coming. The financial burden was crushing. My cousin told me my father was denied a home equity loan. They were behind on property taxes. The house might actually be at risk. Part of me felt sad, the part that remembered being their daughter before I became their ATM. But they'd pressured me to give up my stability for my sister's comfort. They'd stood by while she assaulted me. So my sympathy was limited. The baby was born on a Tuesday in late January. I found out through Facebook. A girl, 7 pounds, healthy. There was no announcement sent to me, no invitation to meet my niece. I was dead to them, remember? I looked at the photos. My sister looked exhausted, overwhelmed, alone. My mother held the baby, looking older than I remembered. My father wasn't in the pictures. I felt only distant observation, like watching strangers' lives unfold. This could have been different. They could have been happy for my success. They could have asked for help respectfully and accepted my boundaries. They could have treated me like family instead of a resource, but they'd made their choices. My lawyer called with an update. My sister had stopped responding about the settlement. She'd essentially defaulted, which meant the judgment would stand and liens would remain. She'd deal with this for years. Every tax refund garnished, every credit attempt blocked, every hope of moving tied up in legal obligations she'd brought on herself. I authorized enforcement. No mercy, no negotiation. They'd taught me family loyalty was conditional on compliance with their demands. I'd learned the lesson well. My loyalty was now to myself, to the life I'd built, to my boundaries, and I wasn't apologizing for that ever again. Something unexpected happened after everything became public. My career exploded. I'd worried the controversy might hurt my reputation, that clients would see me as dramatic. Instead, I became exactly the lawyer people wanted. Women started requesting me specifically. They'd seen the video and recognized their own stories. Daughters pressured to bankroll siblings. Sisters guilt-tripped into co-signing loans. Mothers expected to provide free childcare while working full-time. All treated as resources rather than people. Finally ready to establish boundaries. My firm's partners noticed the client influx. They created a new practice area focused on family financial abuse and property disputes, asking me to lead it. Substantial raise, my own team, autonomy to take cases I believed in. My name went on the door, literally. I stood in the hallway staring at that nameplate for 5 minutes. I started speaking at legal conferences, women's organizations, law schools. The topic, protecting yourself from family financial abuse. Establishing boundaries, recognizing manipulation disguised as obligation. Audiences responded intensely. During Q&A, people would share their stories, often crying. The validation meant everything to them. A national magazine wanted to profile me. The piece ran with the headline, "The Lawyer Who Refused to Give In," and contextualized my story within larger patterns of financial abuse, particularly targeting successful women. After that, a publisher contacted me about writing a book. The book would tell my story, but also create a practical guide. How to recognize financial abuse. How to establish boundaries. How to protect assets. How to handle guilt and pressure. When legal intervention is necessary. I signed the contract. My apartment became symbolic. Journalists mentioned it. The apartment she refused to surrender. In speeches, I referenced it as concrete proof that boundaries matter. It wasn't just real estate anymore. It was proof you could stand up to family pressure and survive. New friendships formed around my advocacy work. Other lawyers in similar areas, women who'd escaped toxic families, therapists specializing in family trauma. They understood what I'd been through. They didn't think I was dramatic or suggest I just forgive and move on. They got it. One woman from my speaking circuit became a genuine friend. She'd gone through something similar with parents demanding her inheritance. We'd grab coffee and compare horror stories, laugh about the absurdity, support each other through complicated feelings. She introduced me to a whole community who'd chosen between family acceptance and personal autonomy. The work felt meaningful. This was helping people escape situations that could destroy their lives, giving people permission to protect themselves, naming abuse that had masqueraded as love for generations. My firm got media attention too. Legal journals, business magazines, news segments about emerging practice areas. We were bringing in high-profile clients, winning significant cases, establishing precedents. The practice area I'd started accidentally had become one of our most successful divisions. The colleague who'd warned me about optics? She stopped by my office 6 months into my success. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I thought you were making a mistake, but you knew exactly what you were doing. I'm sorry I doubted you." I appreciated that more than she knew. Not everyone can admit when they're wrong. Some people thought I was capitalizing on family trauma or encouraging people to abandon families over money. I got occasional hate mail, but for every nasty message, I got 10 thanking me for giving them courage to say no, for helping them see they deserved better, for showing them that boundaries don't make you bad. They make you someone with self-respect. 6 months after my niece was born, my cousin called, the one I'd always liked, who'd never asked me for anything. "Hey," she said, voice soft. "I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone in the family right now. What do you want?" I asked, guard up immediately. "Nothing, I swear. I saw your niece last week. She's beautiful, Cass. And I know there's all this stuff between you and your sister, but don't you want to at least see her? Just once?" Something twisted in my chest. A baby, my niece, family. I don't know. You could come to my place. Neutral ground. Your sister wouldn't even have to know. I could bring the baby over, you could hold her for like 10 minutes, and that's it. No strings. Just, don't you want to meet her? I almost said yes. The word was right there on my tongue. Because what if I was being too rigid? What if I was punishing an innocent baby for her mother's sins? What if years from now I'd regret not having any connection to my niece? Then my cousin said, "Your mom thinks it might help smooth things over. You know, break the ice. Start healing the family." And there it was. The real reason for the call. This wasn't about the baby. This was another manipulation. Another attempt to get me to cave, to come back, to accept their version of family where I existed to serve everyone else's needs. "I have to go," I said. "Cassandra? Wait." I hung up. Then I sat on my couch and cried for an hour. Not because I'd made the wrong choice, but because it was so exhausting having to keep making it. My partner came home and found me there, and he just held me. No judgment, no advice, just presence. That's when I truly understood the difference between real family and the one I'd been born into. While my professional life thrived, something equally important happened personally. For the first time since law school, I started actually living in my apartment instead of just sleeping there. I converted the smallest bedroom into a reading room, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable armchair by the window, good lighting, plants that survived. I'd spent years claiming I was too busy to read for pleasure, but that was a lie learned from my family. They'd trained me to believe time not spent working was time wasted. Now I read, fiction mostly. Sunday mornings in that chair with coffee and a book felt revolutionary. The middle bedroom became an art studio. I'd loved watercolor in college, But my family made clear art was for people who could afford hobbies. I needed to focus on practical things, on becoming successful enough to lift everyone else up. So I'd abandoned it. Now I bought good supplies and spent evenings painting. I was terrible at first, but I didn't care. The point was joy. I started hosting gatherings, dinner parties, book club meetings, art nights where we'd paint badly and laugh. My home became a place of connection instead of just a fortress. People commented on how welcoming it was, and I realized I'd never made it welcoming before. Now it was truly home. My neighbor from 2 floors down started attending these gatherings. A friend had brought him to book club. He was a therapist, almost too perfect. He'd heard my story but didn't treat me like a curiosity or victim. He treated me like someone who'd made hard choices and was building something new. We started having coffee together, then dinners, then long walks through the neighborhood I'd fought to stay in. He understood boundaries in ways most people don't. Never pushed, never demanded explanations. He just existed beside me, solid and kind. He'd been through his own family drama, different details, similar themes. We'd compare notes about the guilt that lingered after doing the right thing, about the weird grief of losing living family members, about building chosen family from scratch. He got it. One night, 3 months into dating, I broke down. We were having dinner in my apartment when I got a text from an unknown number. Just a photo of my niece with the caption, "She'll never know her aunt because you chose pride over family." I showed him the text, hands shaking. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm being stubborn. Maybe I should just stop, he said, taking my phone and setting it down. Cassandra, look at me. You need peace, not forced forgiveness. You know what forgiveness without changed behavior is? It's just permission for them to hurt you again. But she's a baby, an innocent baby, and I'm punishing her for... You're not punishing anyone. You're protecting yourself. And that baby, she's not being harmed by your absence. She's being harmed by growing up with people who think assault is an acceptable response to boundaries. That's not on you. I started crying. He held me while I sobbed into his shoulder, not trying to fix it, not telling me what to do. Just being there. Solid. Safe. You don't have to carry their guilt, he said quietly. That's theirs to bear. 3 months later, things between us had deepened in ways I'd never experienced before. He asked about the master bedroom one quiet Sunday morning. I'd been avoiding redecorating that room. Still just a bed and dresser, functional and cold. I don't know, I admitted. It feels like the last piece I haven't figured out. Maybe that's because it's not just your space anymore, he said carefully. Maybe you're waiting to share it with someone. Are you asking to move in? I'm asking if you're ready to build something new. Not to replace what you lost, but to create what you actually want, with someone who respects your boundaries instead of testing them. That's when I knew I was going to marry him. He moved in slowly. A drawer, then a closet, then half the bathroom counter. We didn't rush. We were both aware of how precious this piece was. But gradually, the master bedroom transformed from a place I slept into a space we shared. The apartment my family tried to take became the foundation for the life I'd always wanted. Not just successful, but whole. Not just safe, but genuinely happy. Not just surviving, but thriving. I'd wake up weekend mornings next to my partner, watch the light through the windows, and feel something I'd spent years not believing I deserved. Contentment. Not anxious grinding to be good enough. Not constant pressure to meet everyone else's needs. Just simple, quiet contentment in a life built on my own terms. My family wanted this apartment because they thought they deserved it more. Because they thought my success belonged to them. They tried to guilt me into believing I didn't need or deserve safety and comfort. And if I'd given in, I'd have lost so much more than real estate. I'd have lost myself. Therapy became regular in my life, and those sessions weren't always comfortable. My therapist had a talent for asking questions I didn't want to answer. Do you ever wonder if there was a different way to handle it? She asked one session, maybe 9 months after everything happened. I'd thought about this constantly. Sometimes, I admitted, I wonder if I could have set boundaries without legal action, without the public exposure. And what do you conclude? That I did what I had to do. They didn't leave me any other options. Every time I'd said no before, they escalated. They guilt-tripped me until I gave in. The apartment demand wasn't the first time. It was just the biggest ask. She nodded. Tell me about the champagne moment. I closed my eyes, remembering the cold splash, the humiliation, the clarity. I knew instantly that nothing I could say would make them see me as a person. I was an obstacle, and when obstacles don't move, You break them. My sister threw that champagne to punish me. And my parents just stood there. How does that memory make you feel now? Vindicated. Every time I question whether I overreacted, I remember that champagne running down my face. I remember they saw violence as acceptable when I had boundaries. And I know I made the right choice. The video still existed online. Sometimes I'd see it reshared. New people would discover it and argue in comments. I'd stopped reading them. Other people's opinions couldn't change that I was finally okay. My therapist asked about guilt. I don't feel guilty about protecting myself, I said, but I feel sad about what could have been. Could? If they'd been different people. I feel sad my niece is growing up in that environment. I feel sad my parents are struggling. But sadness isn't guilt. What's the difference? Guilt implies I did something wrong. Sadness just acknowledges the situation is unfortunate. I didn't create this. I just refuse to be destroyed by it. She asked about reconciliation. Not unless they fundamentally change, I said. Not unless they acknowledge what they did, take responsibility, and demonstrate through sustained action they understand boundaries. Anything less would just be walking back into the same dynamic. Do you think they're capable of that? No. They'd have to admit they were wrong. That they abused me. That they treated me like property instead of a person. People like that don't suddenly develop self-awareness. My partner and I talked about this too. He'd asked if I missed having family. I explained I did have family now. Just not the one I was born into. Friends who supported me. Colleagues who respected boundaries. A community who understood. And him, choosing to build something based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The family I was born into taught me love is conditional, I told him. That acceptance has a price tag. That my value was what I could provide them. The family I'm building operates differently. And that's worth more than any blood relation. The book I was writing forced multiple perspectives. My editor pushed me to acknowledge complexity. I could intellectually understand where my family came from. Their struggles shaped their behavior. But understanding didn't mean accepting abuse. Context didn't mean I owed them my safety, my peace, my home. The champagne video sat in my cloud storage, backed up and preserved. Not because I enjoyed it, I hadn't viewed it in months, but because it was evidence. Proof I wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting, wasn't the villain. Whenever doubt crept in, I could remember exactly why I'd made these choices. I'd chosen myself, finally, completely, unapologetically. And choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's been 2 years since that gender reveal party. I'm writing this from my reading room, afternoon light streaming through windows I almost gave up. Sometimes I can't believe how close I came to surrendering everything just to keep peace with people who never wanted peace. They wanted compliance. My family moved 18 months ago to a different city 3 hours away. My cousin said they couldn't handle the social fallout. Everywhere they went, people knew them as that family from the video. My father couldn't rebuild his reputation. My mother couldn't shop without whispers. They needed a fresh start. My sister still lives in the neighborhood she was desperate to escape. High crime, terrible schools. She's raising her daughter alone. My brother-in-law remarried and moved across the country. He sends child support barely. Legal judgments mean she can't move, can't get loans, can't build credit. She's stuck exactly where she started, except now alone with a toddler. I don't hate them. I just don't think about them much anymore. This morning, my partner made coffee while I painted. Terrible watercolors of the view from our balcony, all wrong proportions and muddy colors. He looked over my shoulder and said, "It's perfect." And I laughed because it absolutely wasn't. But that was the point. I was making something terrible just for the joy of making it. Last week, we hosted a dinner party. 8 people crowded around my dining table, laughing and talking over each other. My friend from the speaking circuit brought homemade bread. My partner's sister, who feels more like family than my actual sister ever did, told stories that had everyone in tears from laughing. At one point, I looked around the table and thought, this is what family should feel like. My niece is 2. I've never met her. Probably never will. I used to wonder what she'd be told about me. Now I wonder if she'll one day break the cycle herself. If she'll learn to choose peace over obligation. I hope so. But I can't control that. My book came out 6 months ago. Boundaries Over Blood. Reclaiming Your Life from Family Financial Abuse. 3 printings. Optioned for a documentary series. Last month, I got a letter from a reader. She said my book helped her leave a family that had been financially abusing her for 20 years. She said she finally felt free. I cried reading that letter. The apartment has increased considerably in value. My realtor calls every few months asking if I'm ready to sell. Do you know what you could get for this place? she always asks. And I always say the same thing. I'm not selling. Because this apartment isn't an investment. It's the reading room where I discovered I could rest. It's the studio where I learned to create without purpose. It's the kitchen where my partner and I cook together, dancing badly to music while dinner burns slightly. It's the balcony where we drink coffee on Sunday mornings, planning nothing, doing nothing, just existing together in comfortable silence. It's the bedroom where I sleep peacefully, without nightmares about family members showing up to take what's mine. It's the home where I learned that I was enough, exactly as I was, without needing to earn my existence through sacrifice. My partner proposed 3 months ago, right in the reading room. He got down on one knee between the bookshelves and said, "I want to build a life with you, not because I need anything from you, just because I love who you are when you're free to be yourself." We're planning a small wedding next spring in our building's courtyard. Yesterday, we tasted cakes. We argued playfully about whether to serve champagne at the reception. I said absolutely not, and he laughed until he cried. And then we ordered the lemon cake that was too expensive but perfect. The guest list is full of people who chose to be in our lives. People who respect boundaries. People who celebrate our happiness without conditions or expectations. My family won't be invited. I've made peace with that. Sometimes I still get messages from strangers who found the video. Some are supportive, some call me heartless. Last week, someone sent me a long message about how family is everything, how I'll regret this on my deathbed, how blood is thicker than water. I deleted it without responding. Because here's what I've learned. The full saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. And I chose this life, this home, this love, this peace. The prosecutor who started this retired last year. At her retirement party, she pulled me aside. "You did it," she said. "You protected yourself and turned it into something meaningful. I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of me too," I said. And I meant it. So here I am. My partner is making dinner, something with too much garlic, exactly how I like it. My art supplies wait in the studio. My bookshelf is full of stories. My career flourishes. My home is filled with laughter and music and people who value me. My family wanted to take this. They believed they deserved it more. They were wrong. The real victory wasn't proving them wrong. It wasn't watching consequences unfold. It was discovering I could build a beautiful, joyful, peaceful life without their approval, without their presence, without their constant demands. I'm getting married in the spring. I'm writing another book. I'm painting terrible watercolors. I'm drinking coffee on Sunday mornings with someone who loves me without conditions. I'm hosting dinner parties and laughing with friends and sleeping peacefully in a home that's finally, completely mine. I don't know if that's a happy ending, but it's my ending, and I chose it. And that's more than enough. It's everything.